Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Jake from College Football Red Zone coming at you with a brand new iteration of the first look series where I take a holistic look at all 138 FBS programs entering the 2026 college football season and going to be jumping into a brand new program here. We are going to be talking some Michigan State football, and Michigan State has felt some fair number of changes with both the coaching staff and its roster as well. So I'm very intrigued by how this conversation is going to go on the 62nd ranked team in college football. But regardless of where things go in today's little iteration of the First Look series, I hope you guys have been genuinely enjoying it because it's been really fun to do all of these breakdowns, even though it's at the cost of a little bit of sleep. But hey, if you guys been enjoying things here, man, make sure you do a couple things for me real fast. Hit that like button and then as well as hit that subscribe button as well if you do happen to be brand new to the channel. And with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into it. The Michigan State Spartans checking in as your 62nd ranked team in all of college football. And there is going to be a man that is going to take over. You guys are very familiar with this man, and that is going to be none other than Pat Fitzgerald, longtime head coach for the Northwestern Wildcats. Put together a solid record for a program that isn't the most known for football, but, he took Northwestern to respectability, right? And especially in the time of the Big Ten West, for example, he was able to take this Northwestern program and lead them to a Big Ten championship game. Never won the Big Ten championship because the West Division was notoriously much easier to win than the Eastern Division. But at the same time, he was at least able to accomplish that. Now, they did have a scandal that did end up coming out towards the end of his tenure that did end up leading to him being let go from Northwestern, but now he gets a second chance here at Michigan State to try to turn things around after what's been some underwhelming years up there in Lansing, Michigan, right? So going to be very fascinating from the beginning because Matt Fitzgerald's MO has always been about development, and that worked well at Northwestern in the pre-NIL and pre-transfer portal era. Is that going to work here? Is he going to have the time to instill his system, and is there going to be enough investment to keep guys in the building so that they can develop in his system properly? So that's always going to be an interesting question moving forward. And also on top of that, this is going to have to be a team that's going to have to win with physicality because I am going to be concerned with the offensive weapons on the perimeter in particular. You're talking about losing Aiden Childs, for example, who ironically enough does transfer to Northwestern. So you're hoping that somebody at the quarterback position develops internally from that standpoint. I know Aiden Childs was a little bit disappointing, but at the same time, I mean, this is someone that does have 2 years of starting experience in the Big Ten, so losing that out the gate is not a great start. You also lose Nick Marsh as well, who transfers to Indiana. That was a really talented wide receiver leaving your building as well, and they didn't bring anybody in that had production at their previous stop. So again, looking for that internal production. Same thing with the tight end position. Yes, I am intrigued by Carson Gulker, who comes from Ferris State. Don't know how high of his ceiling is as a receiving tight end, though. He had 550 yards and 7 touchdowns. But that was at the Division II level. And so going from Division II all the way up to the Power Conference ranks, and yes, I know we saw this transition very recently with a Trinidad Chambliss, but that was a home run, but that's not always going to happen. Home runs are obviously very rare, so that's not something that you should count on, even though Ferris State is an incredible Division II program. They lost Jack Failing, though, and I think Jack Failing at this time is a better tight end than what a Carson Gulker is at the moment. So I am concerned about the really not just the quarterback position holistically, but I'm also worried about the offensive weapons on the perimeter. So it's going to have to be one of those things where they're going to have to try and win with physicality and win with toughness, which leads to the other thing that I am a little bit concerned about. Not as concerned as the offensive playmakers and the offensive skill guys in general. but it's still a little bit of concern. They lose Alex Van Sirmerian to USC. He had over 50 tackles as an interior defensive lineman, so that's not ideal either. Again, you only lose one notable defensive line piece in the transfer portal, so that's a little bit easier to overcome. But that is still someone who had plenty of reps at Michigan State last year, and it's no longer going to be here moving forward. But um, definitely some interesting pieces, though. They are looking to replace Malachi Frazier with Cam F. Edwards, who had over 1,000 yards at UConn. We'll see if that translates well for him, and he's going to have the benefit of running through a couple of pretty good offensive linemen at the G6 level that were portaled in. Ben Murakowski from UConn, is a really good football player, and Cam Edwards is very familiar with that because they were teammates under Jim Mora last year. He also brought in Trent Fraley, an interior offensive lineman from North Dakota State, another guy that could step in and be a starter on this Michigan State offensive line. So I do think that they're going to be looking pretty solid in the trenches this year with those two ads as long as they gel relatively well. Defensively, I think this defense is going to carry some toughness, even though there is questions in uh, the direct defensive trenches. I really like the linebacker additions that they made, Kenny Soares Jr. from NC State, as well as Deion Crawford from Buffalo. Those two combined for over 150 tackles last year, so a lot of production coming in. They played quite a bit of football last year. So that is going to help out in terms of making sure everybody is aligned correctly because usually your linebackers are going to be the leaders of your defense. And on top of that as well, this defensive secondary is going to be completely transformed. Led by Trey Bell, the corner out of Iowa State, had multiple interceptions for the Cyclones last year, but that's not all. A couple of really good safeties from the FCS ranks in Cam Stogel from Albany and Devin Vaughn from Maine, who combined for over 120 tackles and 3 interceptions. So, those are two pretty good players from the FCS. And then don't sleep on Michael Richard as well from Louisiana Tech, who had 3 interceptions and was a defensive ball hawk for the Bulldogs last season as well. So the defensive secondary in particular is going to be a transform unit. It's just a matter of moving guys around to figure out what is going to be the best fit for each player coming into this season. But I think one unit that would excite me the most is that defensive secondary because I think there is a decently high ceiling there in terms of being able to play some really quality football on the back end. And there's some good passing offenses in the Big Ten, surprisingly. So that's going to be needed, and that's certainly going to matter, right? So hey, let's go ahead now and get into this record prediction now for Michigan State entering this season. And I will say this about Michigan State. They are going to have one of the tougher schedules in the Big Ten. And by proximity, they're going to have one of the tougher schedules in the country. This is going to be a top 20 strength of schedule based upon my internal metrics here, right? And at the same time, Pat Fitzgerald is going to be somebody that is going to rely on development. Was his MO at Northwestern, and I imagine, based on what we've seen so far, with the exception of this first year, going to rely a little bit more on, of course, that development, right? So could Paz for Gerald turn it around? Absolutely. But I don't know if it's going to be the case where, it's going to be immediate. It might take a year or two for things to fully kick into place. I do think that this program is good enough, and I think Pat Fitzgerald highly enough to where I think they're going to be able to pull an upset or two off on this schedule this year. Like the Northwestern game, for example, I think Pat Fitzgerald, even though my model would list Northwestern as the favorite instead of Michigan State playing this game in their home building, I actually think that Michigan State could pull that very slight upset off on Northwestern, for example. I obviously think that they're going to be able to beat Toledo and Eastern Michigan, and I don't expect much of a problem in dealing with either of those teams at this time. But I mean, some tough games in here as well. Notre Dame on the road. You also have UCLA, which is a much improved football team, and you got to go all the way across the country to go play them and play Bob Chesney, who actually made it to the college football playoff. Michigan has a real head coach now as well, and Kenny Winningham, and you're going to have to play in the big house to play those games. Washington is a pretty good football team, and Oregon coming in with some incredibly high expectations as well. Plus, Rutgers has always been a feisty team under Greg Schiano. I know we actually literally talked about Greg Schiano last episode of this first look series, and I know I wasn't super high on him. I'm concerned about the game passing him by, but man, I mean, Greg Schiano, he's still a feisty guy, even though he may be past his prime from a coaching perspective. Um, do think that there's some other winnable games in here when you even when you get into Big Ten play. Nebraska at home. Nebraska is going to have some moving pieces, losing Dylan Raiola most notably. Wisconsin on the road. Obviously, we know that Luke Fickell is going to find himself on the hot seat. And then Illinois playing Brett Bielema doesn't have a ton of returning production. That's usually a hallmark of a really good Illinois football team, and he just doesn't have that. So a fighting chance for Michigan State to win that game, with it being at home as well. So there's room here for Michigan State to get into a bowl game, but ultimately I'm not expecting much at this time. I'm expecting a 3-9 record, winning your two MAC games, and then pulling a win against Northwestern to where they at least win one Big Ten game. But it's certainly possible that they can go winless in Big Ten conference play. I think that floor is certainly possible as well. But again, if everything goes right and Pat Fitzgerald is much better and much more acclimated with the current era of college football than expected, then you're talking about Michigan State playing in a bowl game in his first year, which I think would be a really successful season given expectations. But curious to hear your thoughts, though. Is this a team that are you a little bit higher on than me, or am I a little bit lower? Definitely let me know down in the comments section, as I do have them as my 62nd ranked team in college football. But with that being said, for right now, hopefully you guys enjoyed this first look at the Michigan State Spartans. And if you did, make sure you go ahead, hit that like button, as well as hit that subscribe button as well. If you do happen to be brand new to the channel, and with that being said, this is Jake from College Football Red Zone signing off. Hoping you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everybody.